Finally, the day the world has been waiting for has arrived. Today is Friday, October 3rd, 2025, and inside the Southern District of New York courthouse, the fate of Sean Diddy Combs will be sealed forever. The noise outside is deafening. Protesters chanting justice for the victims clash with loyal fans crying, "Free Diddy." News anchors stand shoulder to shoulder, cameras flashing, helicopters circling above. This is no ordinary Friday in Manhattan. This is the day one of the most powerful men in music faces the moment he cannot escape: sentencing. The walls of the courthouse hold the echoes of a long and brutal journey. It started on September 19th, 2024, when federal prosecutors unsealed their indictment, painting a picture of a man who used fame and fortune to cover violence, manipulation, and exploitation. Then came May 5th, 2025, when the trial began in this very courthouse. Over 29 days, 34 witnesses stepped forward: ex-girlfriends, escorts, hotel staff, former employees, even federal agents. One by one, they told stories of nights drenched in drugs, fear, and intimidation. And on July 2nd, the verdict struck: acquitted of racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking, but guilty on two Mann Act counts tied to Cassie Ventura and an anonymous woman known only as Jane. Now, months later, it all comes down to this. The prosecution calls him unrepentant, demanding over 11 years. The defense begs for just 14 months, time served, insisting he has already destroyed a broken man who has lost everything: his businesses, his reputation, his freedom. Both sides have spoken, but today, the only voice that matters will be the judges. Before we dive deeper into this unforgettable video, make sure to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon. That way, you'll never miss any new coming videos like this. Now let's get back to it, because today isn't just about Sean Diddy Combs. Today is about the fall of an empire. From red carpets and platinum records to shackles and prison khakis, this is the day the mask is stripped away. No cameras will capture the moment inside, but the entire world is watching, waiting, holding its breath. The man once called untouchable now sits shackled in silence as the judge prepares to speak the words that will define the rest of his life. And when those words come, they will echo far beyond this courtroom. They will mark the day fame finally bowed to justice. From the moment the sun rose over Manhattan, the courthouse was no longer just a building of stone and glass. It became the epicenter of a storm the world could not ignore. Reporters had camped outside since dawn, their microphones raised high, their voices already breaking headlines before the judge even stepped into the room. Police lined the sidewalks, their barricades barely holding back the sea of people that stretched across blocks. Protesters shouted for justice, their voices raw with years of anger, holding signs with words like "No more silence" and "Justice for Cassie." Just feet away, loyal fans of Sean Diddy Combs stood shoulder to shoulder, screaming his name, clutching posters of his albums, refusing to let go of the man who had once been the soundtrack of their lives. Two armies of voices clashed in the same street, one demanding accountability, the other begging for mercy. News helicopters circled overhead, their blades chopping through the sky like a drumbeat. The streets pulsed with tension, a rhythm of sirens, chants, and camera flashes. Every second felt like history in motion, as if New York itself was holding its breath for what would happen inside those courtroom walls. Broadcasters filled the airwaves with speculation, repeating the same phrase again and again: "Today, Sean Combs learns his fate." When the black SUVs rolled up, the crowd erupted. Cell phones shot into the air, reporters pushed forward, and the chants grew louder, drowning out even the engines. The door opened, and under the watchful eye of U.S. Marshals, Sean Diddy Combs emerged. Gone was the tailored suit, the confident swagger. Instead, he wore the plain khaki uniform of MDC Brooklyn. His wrist bound in shackles, his face drained of the charisma that once lit up stadiums. The crowd surged against the barricades, some screaming insults, others shouting his name like a prayer. The clash of voices only grew louder as the marshals hurried him through a side entrance, keeping him shielded from the chaos, but not from the judgment of the world. Inside the courthouse, the chaos faded into silence, but the tension only grew heavier. The benches were packed with families, victims, and supporters, their faces pale, their eyes fixed on the defense table. Reporters filled every available seat, sketch artists ready with sharpened pencils to capture the image that cameras could not. Even the walls seemed to lean inward, as though the building itself knew it was about to witness the collapse of an empire. The atmosphere was suffocating. Victims sat stiff, their hands clasped tightly together, some whispering prayers, others staring forward with a resolve born of years in the shadows. On the other side, Diddy's family huddled together, their faces wet with tears, whispering words of faith, clinging to one another as if their unity could somehow shield them from what was about to come. And in the center of it all, Sean Combs sat in silence. His shoulders were tense, his hands pressed together, his head lowered just enough to avoid the eyes that bored into him from every direction. For a man who once lived as if the world revolved around him, the sight was jarring. He was not the mogul. He was not the celebrity. He was simply a man awaiting judgment. The courtroom clock ticked each second louder than the last. Every person in that room knew that what was about to be spoken would not only define Diddy's future, but would echo across culture, music, and history itself. This was no ordinary Friday. It was the day the curtain would fall, the day the mask would shatter, and the world would finally see the cost of power misused. The heavy oak doors closed behind him, shutting out the chaos of Manhattan, and Sean Diddy Combs was led into the courtroom under the watchful eye of U.S. Marshals. The metallic clink of his shackles echoed against the marble floor, a haunting reminder that the man once known for red carpets and flashing cameras was now nothing more than a prisoner awaiting judgment. He shuffled toward the defense table, his movements stripped of swagger, his face drained of the confidence that had once been his trademark. For a moment, the entire room seemed to lean forward, as if trying to capture every detail of his fall. Diddy lowered himself into the chair, his chains rattling softly as he settled, his hands clasped so tightly that his knuckles turned pale. The khaki uniform of MDC Brooklyn hung loose on his frame, a cruel contrast to the tailored designer suits he once wore with pride. He did not look up. His eyes remained fixed on the polished wood of the table before him, avoiding the piercing stares that came from every corner of the room. Behind him, his family filled the benches, their grief impossible to hide. His children sat together, their faces pale, their eyes swollen from tears that had already been shed. One held onto a crumpled tissue. Another stared straight ahead as though holding onto this moment would somehow slow it down. Their father, once untouchable, now sat shackled in front of them, and the reality of it was unbearable. A few loyal friends whispered prayers under their breath, their hands clasped, their lips trembling with every word. They had stood by him when others walked away, but their loyalty could not change what was about to happen. Across the aisle sat the victims and their supporters. Their silence was sharp, more powerful than any chant or shout could ever be. Some gripped hands tightly, others sat with tissues ready, their gazes steady on the man who once loomed over their lives like an immovable shadow. There was no triumph in their eyes, only a quiet determination, a collective demand that justice finally speak louder than influence. Their presence was proof of the pain that had carried them to this point, of the scars that could never be erased. The contrast was striking. Two halves of a courtroom divided by grief and resolve. One side begged silently for mercy, the other waited desperately for justice. And in the middle of it all sat Sean Combs, the epicenter of it all, a man who once commanded rooms with his presence, now reduced to silence and chains. Reporters scribbled furiously in their notepads, capturing every shift of his body, every glance, every tremor in the air. Sketch artist's pencil scratched across paper, immortalizing his bowed head, his slumped shoulders, the weight of his downfall pressed into a few simple lines of graphite. These images would soon flash across every news broadcast, the only visuals the world would see of this historic day, replacing the glossy covers and music videos that had once defined his image. The judge had not yet spoken, but the weight of the moment was already suffocating. Every person in that room knew that they were witnessing not just a sentencing, but the collapse of a myth, the dismantling of an empire that once seemed indestructible. The air was heavy, the silence thick, broken only by the faint ticking of the courtroom clock. And at the defense table, Sean Diddy Combs sat frozen, the weight of decades pressing down on him. He was not the star, not